This is a lot slower this news week, right?
I mean, we still have collapsing economies.
Yeah,
Bangladesh.
multiple.
Well,
Yeah,
governments, not governments. Our
yeah,
economy is collapsing, but
yeah, right. Slowly but
slowly.
surely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Bangladesh was an interesting one because I don't feel like that got a lot of coverage. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, it's a very, I feel like a very quick one. So in Bangladesh, they basically reinstated rulings that have been going on since the 70s that basically gave 30% of the government to 30% of the government. And I mean, if you look at it, it gave it to 30% of descendants, and but it in turn it was people into the government, is what the
Right.
protesters were saying. And so a bunch of young people came out and were protesting really in the matter of just a couple of months, which we obviously didn't hear about. But then over a matter of 3 days, that's all it took. 3 days, they took over the prime minister's home. The guards,
Right.
they did have guards in front of her home, and they kind of gave up. They were like, yeah, there's too many of them, not enough of us, so yeah, have at it. And they, I don't know, like 007 style, took her out with a helicopter, her and her sister, left behind her
Yeah.
animals.
Oh, I
And
know that.
yeah, I don't know, she apparently escaped to India, maybe is in London, we don't really
Yeah.
know. And now we're just waiting to see if the military is taking over, if a bunch of college students are taking over their government. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I started looking into the story a little more, I'm going, okay, wait, was it a military coup? But it didn't say that anywhere. But I
No.
did see a lot of remarks from the military at this point, um, which were interesting. And then again, not well versed in the story, but I did see. So the woman who is in charge now, uh, her father was previously in charge. And did you read this? That and again, I don't know this story well, but what I read was that the majority of her father's family was murdered when he lost power. Did you see that?
Well, and she's been in power for a longer time than a lot of female
Right.
prime ministers, too.
This morning, I didn't see a lot of coverage on that. In the last couple of days, I just didn't see an awful lot of coverage on that. I thought it's interesting. I thought there was, I mean, because it is so dramatic, right? That, I mean,
I know.
wow.
I really like. Did we have video coverage of this helicopter taking her out? That's what I just
Right.
I needed to see it. Was there netting? Like, did it
Right.
scoop her out? Like, how did it
Did
happen?
did anyone tuck and roll? Like, you
Right, tuck
know,
and roll, grandma. Like, yeah.
how did that work out? No, that was an interesting story. Definitely. I'm sure less so for the people who are involved in it, but
Right. Yeah, we're
yeah,
talking in jest, but
yeah, right, of course. But yeah, no, so I mean a lot of protests, right? We talked about Venezuela, now we're talking about Bangladesh. You know, there's a lot of places throughout the world that are kind of like regularly kind of in the zone, but at the same time, did you see so we normally touch base, right, kind of before we have these talks. I didn't bring it up because it slipped my mind, but worth mentioning protests in England. Did you see that one?
oh, I didn't.
Okay, so this one is interesting. It's always terribly sad, and all these protests, you know, like it starts like, oh, protest, but then like you find out why, and it's like, oh God, England having what are now being described as violent protests, and it stems from the end of last week. A person stabbed several young children. Three of these little girls died, and the pictures, I literally just got goosebumps because it's awful to think about. So while in the United States we have like mass shootings, in England they have knife crime. They have a lot more stricter gun controls,
Right.
but the criminals find a way, and they have knife crime, which is like what they're often talking about when we're talking about gun crime. So, anyways, he went in and stabbed a whole bunch of little girls. I think they range like 7, 8, 9, like in that range. 3 of them are dead. The pictures are like make me nauseous. These are beautiful little girls. I think he was charged with 10 more counts of attempted murder. And I think there are 8 other little girls who are wounded in this event. Now, what happened was the public received misinformation, and this is what I'm reading, right? I'm not there. The public received misinformation regarding essentially what would be the ethnicity of this person. And people are under the wrong impression that he is not a citizen and that he is like an immigrant in some fashion. And so all this crazy protesting is going on. They're like burning down hotels. So the information that I read that appears to be true is that this 17-year-old boy was born in England. He is a citizen. He was born in Wales, I think it was. I believe his parents are from Rwanda. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter where you are that you're talking about this scenario. All the neighbors are always in shock, right? The neighbors are like, they described him as, quote, a choir boy. They said he was shy. They actually said on multiple accounts that I read that he never left the house. He would come home from school and stay home from school. The family was big into church. Everyone is just absolutely in shock that this would happen. But again, he was one of those like very shy, quiet individuals. So that seems to be quite a trend when it comes to, discussing these perpetrators. And it's like shocking, right? But it's like, it's so sad. The pictures of these little girls.
Going back to the misinformation, did you hear what happened with Bloomberg? Actually, and the prisoner swap and Russia. So this
we didn't even talk about that. Yeah.
So this is kind of interesting. We had the hostages. We, exchanged our big ones for a few Russian prisoners. However, prior to that happening, Bloomberg published an article saying that it was happening. The only problem was that it wasn't actually confirmed and it didn't actually take place yet. So in turn, what they did is they put all of those lives in jeopardy. And I mean, luckily, it turned out to be okay. But we're dealing with Russia. I mean, at the end of the day, it could have easily went the other way. And, Bloomberg says they handled it. Oh, absolutely. I mean, Putin is not, you can't go leaking information before a hostage exchange.
Right. Well, and you know what? I think this is becoming like our repetitive theme, or rather my repetitive theme here is journalism. Hello. Like, I am nobody. I am allowed to say what I saw on the news. I am not a journalist. Like, you guys are. What is going on with this profession? I'm not understanding it. To leak a story like this, all right, yeah, sure, you want to be, the first one to tell it. But, and again, you've got to confirm this kind of information. What's going on? Everything's so sensationalized that, like, in order to get the headline, you have to cross the line.
And Bloomberg was the one that was fighting for so long to get the Americans released. So really, I mean, they were hurting their own cause by doing that.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's you want to say it's shocking, but it's not. Repeatedly are having issues with journalism these days. And it's like, I feel like we're talking about that every time in some capacity or another. So shame on them. I was very happy to see what I saw. I watched Biden when he was like live on air. I watched, a lot of it actually happening, going down. I kind of followed the story pretty good. Like I said, I didn't dig into it. I'm sure there's two sides to every coin, but reality is I think it was a a worthwhile exchange. One of the things, and I'll ask you what you think about this, because I do hear people saying, well, we gave away really hardened criminals, and they shouldn't have been released, right? That is one of the arguments that I hear. The reality is that we place a huge amount of value on our citizens, those people that are wronged for, no reason, essentially, right? That really don't belong anywhere near a Russian prison or jail. And it's worth it. It's worth it to give up certain
Don't you think
people.
it is? I think it is. Absolutely.
I agree with that.
So yeah, I think that is important, and I think their families would agree.
So when we give back these criminals, it encourages Russia to continue wrongfully convicting and holding these hostages from places like the United States. You think they wouldn't do it anyway?
Right.
You think that they would say, like, oh no, they're not going to give back our criminals, so we're just not going to, work unfairly in the justice system that we've created. I don't think that's going to happen. So I was pleased with what I saw. I thought it all went very well. Obviously, there's always more work to do. Thankfully, I think there's some really positive outcomes on, and really glad to have watched that. That actually made me feel pretty good. And then immediately thereafter, the stock market plunged. Japan's Nikkei index was the lowest it's been since 1987.
Crypto lowest it's been in 6 months.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
Can we have 5 minutes, guys?
I mean, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean, can we just go back? I mean, are we going to start making moonshine and going back? Like, do I need to get my flapper dress out? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, if only we can't afford alcohol anymore because of the prices of everything.
That's true.
Despite how often I hear on the news that it's not that bad. I don't know. Do you hear that all the time? What I hear is that I hear that, the grocery prices are higher, but they're not that much higher. And then they'll cite some numbers, and I'm like, where are you shopping?
My favorite is the unemployment rates.
Right.
Let's talk unemployment rates, shall we? The unemployment rates, they're great. People are working. They're working jobs.
Right? I mean, everybody's working. Don't worry about it. They all have about 6 part-time gigs. It's fine,
Yeah, side hustle nation, maybe.
Exactly. That's not the way to do it, man. I mean, listen, that's my opinion, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm nobody. But so the stock markets fell, right? They're kind of taking a big hit. When I watched it, and I get my days confused, so work with me here. But I believe on Thursday you saw things were going down, and on Thursday I was watching, and they're saying it's okay. So the Dow, it's taking a hit, but it's still above that benchmark, 40,000. Like, that's a good number. It's coming down a little, no big deal. That was Thursday. Friday, I see, okay, so now we're closing at about 39 or so, 39,000. So I'm like, I guess that little, don't worry is out the window. So then there goes the weekend. Monday, I think we're down to, last time I checked right now, 38.8 in that range. I saw that, So I saw some statement saying that aftermarket trading was up. I saw a lot of information saying that the Nikkei index was up as much as like 10% in Japan. They're talking a lot about that one.
That must be why my sister got really cheap flights to Japan. She just booked her flights to Japan. She's going for 2 months. And that's why she is going. She's going for like $800 less than she went 2 years ago. And it's got to be why. I'm telling you. Yeah. She took advantage.
Yeah. Smart. Well, good for her. And I hope I get a souvenir. I read a lot of stuff about this stock market. And when we talked about it, I said to you, I have a lot of opinions, of course, because I always do. But one of the things that I'm reading is basically, now, just to go back a hair, one of the plethora of reasons that the stock market, took a dive is because of the unemployment rates. So the unemployment, report came out, wasn't what people were hoping for. Stock market took a hit. So generally speaking, stock markets don't like uncertainty. And we see a lot of uncertainty everywhere. Election, jobs, other markets like Japan. So you're going to see that. Now, when I'm reading, a lot of the information I'm reading and I'm seeing local news, CNN, whatever, they're all saying, yes, it's all taking a hit, but don't panic. It will all be fine. We'll get through this. This is a market correction. This is a stock market correction. That's what they're all saying. I agree to an extent that this is a correction because there has been a flurry and or a frenzy, and we've all seen it of spending, and the same goes for the stock market. So I agree to an extent that there is, a correction due. We'll see what happens in the next couple of days. One of the conversations that everybody seems to be having is, well, the Fed, just before this all happened, the Fed came out and said, we are not going to lower our interest rates. So the Fed says that they are going to not adjust interest rates. This is before everything happens. Now everything's gone down. Things are all crazy. And they're saying, well, in September, the Fed meets, they're almost definitely going to bring the interest rates down. There's been some talk about an emergency Fed meeting where the Fed might meet and say, well, we're going to bring it down now before this September. Fed uses interest rates like duct tape on 100%. The economy. There are bigger issues. There are bigger issues to be dealt with that need to be discussed, need to be dealt with, need to be talked about in the open. We cannot pretend that just adjusting interest rates, you can't just keep messing around with the interest rate and assuming that everything else will work itself out. That is not how that works. And while we're at it, interest rates were historically low for so many years. Mortgage rates, for example, or credit card rates, but mortgage rates, we're going to go there because I love housing. Since 2008, I'm personally aware of 4 different mortgages, of which each mortgage has had a, quote, record low interest rate on each of these mortgages because every single year it's been record low for so long. There is only so much you can reduce interest rates, and there's only so much it will do to the economy. And when interest rates are so low for so long, what happens? The housing market got all jacked up. We all saw that because why? When there's no interest rate, where are you going to put your money? You're not going to put it in a savings account making $0. You're not going to put it in a CD making 0.001% over the course of the next 14 months, during which time you cannot touch your money, right? You're not going to put it, under your mattress? No, you're going to put it in the housing market, which did encourage a lot of corporations, right, to buy into housing, not just corporations, regular people too. And so we end up with a housing crisis, which is where we're at. I don't have time to get into the inventory issues and to get into the bigger issues that are created, but I personally believe that the interest rates have been a problem for a long time. It has been an issue. This has been coming down the pipeline. Previous to 2020, I remember distinctly talking with somebody and I said, I would make your move in the housing market now because I don't foresee that the trend that we're on is sustainable. You can't just 2.5% mortgage rate. I sent you a screenshot. People used to buy in the 80s and even into the 90s. They were buying these houses basically on a credit card, almost up to 18%, 12%. Ask your parents if you're my age, and if you're not my age, then you probably experienced that credit card basically that you bought your house with. The interest rates were always they were very different. 2.5% is a crazy number to be lending. It's great for some people, but when it's 4%, 3%, 2%, and you're talking since 2008, 2009, that's a long time to have really low interest rates. And that affects a lot of different places, not just the housing market. I wouldn't be surprised if we see an emergency interest rate cut of 0.25%. I wouldn't be surprised. Everybody's saying it's not going to happen, and I hope that it doesn't. But these knee-jerk reactions, we've been seeing them, an awful lot in the past. So we'll see what the market does. We'll see if it brings the interest rates down. We'll see what that does to the housing market, because if you do one emergency and then one in September, what's that going to do for the housing market? It might loosen things up. I don't know. Is it going to keep spending from happening? The frenzy of spending? I don't know. Groceries are still expensive for me when I go out. News tells me they're not. Whatever.
Gas prices are still outrageous.
Which I read one clip that said the gas prices are at a low right now. So that one didn't line up for me.
I'm not sure where they got those numbers from.
Yeah, I don't know. You have to check multiple sources to really get the information.
I mean, that's accurate with everything. You should be checking multiple sources for all of your facts.
But that's why people hopefully are coming to watch us, because who has time to watch 8 different networks to see what's
Absolutely.
what's the same in each channel? We'll watch as much as we can for you.
And we made it through a whole week without talking about Trump or Harris.
Okay, bye.
You've been listening to The Last Week in History with Molly and Rachel. Subscribe for notifications when new episodes drop each Wednesday.